the winner of the 2022 Hot Wheels Legends Tour is, the Texas Toot.
Texas Toot.
Girls don't want just to be film stars and things like that, but many of them, like me, want to be out in nature studying animals. And so a Barbie doll who's Jane is a super idea.
Good evening, USA. Good morning, Asia. I'm Chris Tang, the Faculty Director of the UCLA Center for Global Management. Today's event is hosted by the UCLA Center for Global Management. More importantly, it is sponsored by our Anderson graduating class of 2022. Over the next hour, we shall discuss with our distinguished guest, Steve Totzke, about ways to manage a multinational company such as Mattel in today's dynamic global environment. Before I introduce our guest, let me say a few words about today's topic. Our world has become more fragmented and polarized in recent years, and globalization is becoming more regionalized. Perhaps the Brexit movement, the COVID pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the trade war between the United States and China have propelled these movements. At the same time, there's a new movement pushing for fundamental changes, from shareholder value to stakeholder value, from CSR to ESG and DEI, from offshoring to reshoring, and of course, from 3D printing to GPT. Given this backdrop, managing a multinational firm has never been more challenging. Facing with this changing landscape, what do leaders do? To examine this question, I'm delighted to have Steve Totzke to share his insights and wisdom with us this evening. Steve is currently the president and the global chief commercial officer of Mattel. With over 20 years of experience at Mattel, Steve is leading many consumer products and entertainment brands to unprecedented levels of growth. How does he do it? He combines his expertise in global operations, sales, marketing, finance, and manufacturing, also with leadership experience spanning multiple continents. Steve received his MBA from Pepperdine University. He is currently a board member of the Canadian Toy Association, Australian Toy Association, as well as the Women in Toy Association. Steve, thank you for joining us this evening. Please.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I don't need a clicker. I'll take my water.
Now, my opening remarks was not generated by GPT.
We'll see.
So, Steve, let me start with you. Can you share with me about your phenomenal 20-year plus journey at Mattel? Now, most people think of your career as like a helicopter. I would call it SpaceX rockets, all right? So, share with us about your journey at Mattel.
Well, thank you, Chris. First of all, I was feeling very relaxed since your introduction there. Then I got incredibly nervous with the complexities that you're describing. But my journey at Mattel started off at the very most entry position back in Canada. I'm a Canadian after all. And through many trials and tribulations, successes and failures, mentors, I slowly kind of rose up through the ranks, taking on international assignments in Australia, and then finally moving to the US about a decade ago to lead their sales division for North America. A role I didn't really want to take, but an old friend of UCLA, Bob Eckert, really encouraged me to take the role. I did that. And then about 5 years ago, Ynon Kreiss, our current CEO and chairman, came on board, and he started to make some really fundamental changes to accelerate the performance of Mattel, which were greatly needed. And one of them was he brought global commercial under one leader, tagged me for the role, and that has been my role ever since. So what does that mean? We sell our product over 500,000 doors globally, 150 different countries, and we set up through 35 offices at a regional level. So we have 4 regions. We have EMEA, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and North America, and country managers within there. At a local level, we have a global to local strategy, which basically means our strategies, our fundamental strategies, are from headquarters, and then we execute them locally. There's local nuances along the way, country managers, sales managers, marketing managers, HR, etc. And that is most of my day-to-day.
Wow, you really cover end-to-end operations globally. Well, fantastic. And well, I think that is really wonderful to see how Mattel has evolved over the years. Now, from your perspective, we are curious about how has Mattel changed over the years from Barbie in 1959 till 2023?
Well, let me start with an industry perspective because from a play pattern standpoint, not all that much has changed. ABCs and 1, 2, 3s for the littlest of children. That is globally consistent around the world. Competing and collecting and some conflict play, dress-up play, imagining what you can be, that is all fairly consistent. There's a few big changes, and I'll talk about the US. One large change has been channel distribution. You might remember about 5 years ago, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. You can imagine in my business, this was a seismic event. They were a top 3 customer globally. We couldn't really imagine a world without Toys R Us. We quickly did, however, and I will go into a bit about that. The other big change has been obviously online for all of us. For the toy industry, it does penetrate online quite high. It's about 30%, so 70% brick and mortar or traditional channels, 30% online. So how we've had to adapt with that has been a big change from an industry perspective and for Mattel. I would say some of the other biggest change has been in Barbie, for example. Barbie is now the most diverse and inclusive line of dolls in the world. Everything from size and shapes and ethnicities and physically abled, Barbie truly represents what's in the world. It's critically important for Barbie and all of our brands to reflect what little girls and boys see in society. So that has been a critical change and really a secret to the success of the longevity of the brand. 64 years this year, Chris.
It's absolutely phenomenal because I've observed how Barbie has transformed herself in different sizes and shapes and also different career paths. So this year, Barbie is 64 years old. She was first produced in Japan, but now she has transformed to a different continent. We'll get back to that later. So basically, that's right now, actually, I was so proud that to see Barbie this year. They introduced a girl, Barbie dolls, in honor of a scientist in the UK. To inspire the girls to actually study STEM in terms of become a scientist. So that is really wonderful. Now, so I'm curious that Mattel has been focusing on physical toys for a few decades. But then, of course, things change because now there's so many electronic devices, there's so many Roku TVs, there's so many. So the digital transformation, it seems, is inevitable, right? So it is really quite remarkable that to see Mattel now is actually have a TV series and also a new film. The Barbie 2023 is coming out in July. If you have not seen the trailer, watch it. It's phenomenal, the special effect, right? So now then the question, can you tell me more when you talk about the distribution of physical toys, but now you have to manage the physical toy distributions and also the distribution of the digital entertainment. How do you integrate these two into to generate the synergies between these two?
Sure. Well, there's two things, and I'll start with the second big change, and I'll come back to that question, but they are related. The second biggest change in the industry over the last 20 years has been the evolution of demand creation. We are great innovators, we have great product design, but we're also amazing marketers. We got our start way back in the 50s with the Mickey Mouse Club. Walt Disney and our founders, Ruth and Elliot Handler, were good friends. And they bet the company on TV advertising. The people were like, "You're crazy. You're going to advertise your toy on TV?" And it went off like blockbusters, and the rest is history. But over the last few years, it is no longer Saturday morning TV. You put on a TV advertise and put an ad in the local newspaper, and your product's a hit. It's really evolved. So Barbie has 2.2 million Instagram followers. Hot Wheels and Fisher-Price are prevalent across YouTube. You mentioned the July 21st release of Barbie. Please get your tickets now. We were talking before the break about how this really has been a case study in modern marketing. What they did with the selfie impose thing on Barbie, you could reshare it. It was reshared a ridiculous number of times. I don't want to say the number publicly, but it was in the tens and tens and tens of thousands. So really, from a marketing standpoint, the evolution of demand creation has been critical. And I think who wins that is going to win kids and children's entertainment. From a product standpoint, there too, you've had to really, integrate some of your digital products and your physical products. Sometimes they're separate, sometimes they work together, but always it is in service of the brand and the play pattern and the consumer. It really needs to deepen engagement, and I think our teams have done a phenomenal job of that.
Wow, this is truly amazing. Now let's talk about in terms of new technology. So right now, the whole world is in awe with AI. So now I vaguely remember Mattel was contemplating with the 3D printing, using, you can print your toy at home. So now I think that now I understand Mattel is evolving into using AI to develop toys. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Well, if I put you under NDA, I can, Chris, but until then, I can kind of keep it on the surface. I think the coverage of AI in the last few months is maybe advancing as fast as the technology. Yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, I saw 3 articles on AI. I'm not sure if you saw 60 Minutes. They did a whole feature on AI. So it is equal parts exciting and terrifying. Anybody who's watched a science fiction movie, you kind of know how this one ends, right? So let's be very careful. But in all seriousness, our design and development teams are utilizing AI right now, but they're looking to kind of test and learn and build frameworks to make sure that it's legally compliant, to make sure that it's morally and ethically compliant, to make sure that all trademarks are being respected. So we are testing the waters a little bit with Hot Wheels right now. That will help us, move faster with more precision. Hopefully that it's more desirable. So we're in the early stages. We're partnering with AI Open is the company that we're partnering with, and we'll see how it goes. Right now, we have no plans to integrate it into product just now. We've come a long way from the Magic 8 Ball where you flipped it over and we thought that was AI, but so right now we have it really in the guidelines of design and development.
This is really fascinating because this needs to be well thought through, because that's right now, I think that AI is truly phenomenal, but then there are also concerns. For example, if one day you integrated chatbots in Barbie, then in the case, the girl may also really become a friend with the Barbie, they ignore the parents. So in the case, parents may have concern. Then the question, where do you draw the line so that they can maintain the relationship between parents and children? That's also very important. Now, so let me ask you that in terms of moving forwards in the future, do you see that the digital toy entertainment will replace the physical toy because it's much easier to distribute?
Yeah, look, I don't think so. We've been talking about the demise of traditional toys for as long as I've been at Mattel, and we've been involved in some kind of video game aspect going back to the 80s. Some might remember in the early 80s in television, Mattel in television was going against Atari, and that was the first kind of big battle of the consoles. Fast forward a few years and we acquired the Learning Company to get in that space. We've been in and out of this digital space many times over the years. Currently, we have a great joint ventures with NetEase. It's called Mattel 163. and it's doing card games on your mobile. It's Uno, it's Phase 10, it's Skip-Bo. Some of you have Uno in your bags today. There's been over 300 million downloads to date, and it's one of the most successful mobile games that you can get. So we are venturing into this world, but I don't think that traditional toys will ever go away. As a matter of fact, it still is a growth industry.
I hope that's true. I still like the physical Uno. The mobile Uno is not the same. All right. So now let me go back to supply chain, because that is my passion.
It's your specialty.
Yes, thank you. So I visited your plants in Guangzhou, making Barbie. I think this should still produce there.
Yes.
Now, but then things are getting a little bit more complicated these days because of the COVID, the supply chain resilience, and also there's the tariff that impose importing products from China. So I'm curious to learn from you in terms of how has Mattel changed the supply chain structure over the years?
Yeah, really, we started about 5 or 6 years ago, and we very publicly called it a capital light approach, where we closed 5 of our owned and operated manufacturing facilities around the world. We still have 7, Malaysia and Indonesia, Thailand. We still manufacture quite a lot in China, and Mexico, which is our largest global facility. I had the pleasure to visit both our Indonesia and our Malaysian manufacturing facilities in December, because we were celebrating our 40th and 30 years in those countries. And we really are a staple within these communities. It's quite impressive. Why we decided to exit 5 of those, it's a fixed cost. You have to keep it running. That's how you get your efficiencies. Where we feel we have a competitive advantage at scale, so for example, Hot Wheels, no one could make a Hot Wheels basic die-cast car nearly at the same efficiency as Mattel. We make hundreds of millions of them a year. It's the #1 selling toy year in and year out. And so for us, it makes total sense. Same thing with fashion dolls, with Barbie, with Disney Princess. Where we know that we have the volume, it makes total sense. Where there's uncertainty, that's when we look to co-manufacturing and third parties. The last thing that we did, I'll tell you, is we reduced our SKU count by 35%. SKUs equals working capital, equals tools, equals uncertainty. So by narrowing our focus, we really got more efficient. And we think now that our global supply chain truly is a competitive advantage for Mattel.
It's good to know. Now, I'm curious, when you narrow down the SKUs, because it's difficult to predict the demand for different SKUs, but then there's also risk. You may lose some of the consumer demand because that particular child just wants that SKU that you no longer carry. So how do you go about evaluating this kind of trade-off? Do you see that maybe the child just switch to other toys if it's not available?
Look, forecasting toys is not an easy thing. It is a fast-moving, entertainment-based industry. But I'm confident that we still have plenty of SKUs to service. We had lots of duplication. Like a lot of companies over the years that go through M&A, you get to like similar play patterns. So we might have 3 or 4 or 5 different SKUs that were serving the exact same need. So by going through a very thorough process, you can understand which ones you can do without and minimal volume. It's the long tail of the SKUs. It's your classic 80-20 rule, but it's more like 90-10, and the last 10% are doing less than 1% of your volume, and so it makes sense.
It's good to know it's a return on investments after all. Now let us go back to your comments about Mexico. So that's why I brought along The Economist. There's a full article about Mattel. They consolidate some of the factories in Mexico and now focusing on in Monterrey.
Yes.
And it's become the largest Mattel factories in the world. So can you tell us more about how did it come about?
Look, we've been in Mexico for a long time, one of the longest countries where we've been manufacturing. We also have a great commercial organization there. And everyone is talking about nearshoring, and our biggest market in the world is the US market. We're very large in Mexico as well. And it just made sense for some of the larger, bulkier products that are more expensive to ship across the world. again, return on investment, Chris. We did the math, and it made just so much sense to increase our commitment to that community. There are great toy makers there, and we made the decision. And last year it opened. I was at the ribbon cutting ceremony, and it was a fantastic event.
This is fantastic. So what I learned from you and also the Economist article, because I'm studying supply chain, as you know. So in the Economist article, they talk about also analyze Mattel's strategy. They say, well, the body itself is rather stable, the demand, because, but then in Mexico, they produce the playhouse.
That's
the
true.
The playhouse is much more complicated because of many accessories, depending on what kind of toys inside the playhouse that Barbie would like. So therefore, the demand is difficult to predict. So therefore, it's better to produce closer to American markets such that they can respond to the market dynamics. So that is really make perfect sense. Now, having said that, then of course, the USMCA, the trade agreements, help to tilt the equations favor Mexico. Now, then the questions now, a lot of Americans are pushing for Make in America. So do you foresee one day Barbie will be truly American?
Well, you're putting me on the spot here, Chris. You never do know. I mean, there certainly has been a shift back to some American manufacturing within the industry. Right now, we don't have any plans at the moment. But as I said, you never do know. With technology the way it is, it starts to become more and more sense as things get more automated. So we'll see what the future holds.
Okay. Now, we are in California. Our school is really, really concerned about ESG, environmental issues, also in governance issues. So that is also related to supply chain in the context of circularity, circular economy. So for toys, a lot of toys are made out of plastic. So I, in particular, concerned about plastic, what it can do to the environment. So I'm curious about Mattel's initiatives for promoting reuse, like Lego, resell, recycle, and remanufacturing.
Okay. Well, first of all, we have made very public commitments. And so by 2030, 100% of our toys are meant to be recycled, recyclable, or bio-based components in our plastic. So that's one area. We currently have maintaining a 90% kind of forestry check mark on all of the paper we use. We have that now. We're going to maintain that. So we have made commitments to the environment. We're showing up in some of our brands, for example. So we're not waiting to 2030. We are testing, learning, and expanding right now. Last year, for example, we launched a line called Barbie Loves the Ocean, which was made from all ocean-based plastics, you'll recall. Uno, we have Uno again. Uno's a big theme tonight. We have paper-free Uno, so there's no plastic at all in the packaging. It's all paper-based. Matchbox, we have a new line coming out, Jurassic World Mega. So in many of our product lines now, we're like testing and expanding this concept. So that's number one. And we do have a return program in many major markets in the world, as you mentioned, where you can go to our major retailers and you can return the toys for new, et cetera. So you can do that. Finally, what I would say is, and it goes without saying, the quality of our product is meant to last a lifetime. Hot Wheels basic cars, it's right in the they're guaranteed for a lifetime. And you wouldn't believe the amount of people that will come up to me and say, I still have my Hot Wheels collection from when I was a kid, or my Little People garage set, I've been handing it down from generation to generation. So it starts with great quality product that will last a lifetime. And I think that's what we do better than anybody else.
Wow, this is phenomenal. Now you have no excuse not to buy Mattel toys. All right. So now, besides the environmental issues, our students also care about equitable access to toys. Not all children can afford because Mattel toys is not the lowest price, right? So then the question is I know that Mattel has been very generous donating toys to Children's Hospital, including UCLA Mattel Children's Hospital. Can you share with us in terms of Mattel's initiatives for providing affordable access of toys to children?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me take this moment to thank and acknowledge our longstanding partnership with UCLA. We've been partnering with UCLA for over 35 years. Obviously, the naming rights to one of the best hospitals in the world. The Mattel Children's Foundation was established over 40 years ago. This last summer, we celebrated the Party on the Pier, which is another UCLA collaboration where we had over 100 of our employees volunteer at that event. We donated over 10,000 toys and raised almost $1.5 million. It feels good to do good. But beyond that, all over the world, we work with Save the Children and other organizations to ensure that we can have just not only affordable toys, that we can donate toys to those in need. It's a big part of what we do, and every year we donate millions of dollars worth of toys around the world.
Wow, that's really touching. Well, thank you for doing that. Now, of course, our students, alumni will look to you in terms of how can they learn to be as successful as you in the future. Now, so I noticed that many of my MBA students, they tend to change jobs because it's a new generation, new era. But then you have really stayed with you at Mattel for 20 plus years with the helicopter and the SpaceX rockets promotions. Then the question I would like to ask you is that, is it better to stay put versus then moving around? So what is your advice?
Yeah, well, look, I've been fortunate at Mattel. It's been over 20 years. I'm glad that you kept it at that, Chris. That's very kind of you. But at a company like Mattel, or a big multinational company, I've been fortunate enough that every 3 or 4 years I've had something different to do, whether it's sales or marketing or general management, to go to this country or that country. So I've been able to stay engaged throughout and learning, and have had some great mentors along the way. There's not one way to formulate a career. That's worked for me. It doesn't work for everyone. I have 2 children right now that are in their matriculation years. My daughter's getting her master's, and my son's in his second year at UC Davis. And when we talk, it's about, first of all, a little bit cliche, but make sure you're kind of find your passion early about what you want to do and work your way through it. I'd like to stay 2 to 3 years at an organization, and as long as you continue to learn and stay engaged and plot your course that way, I don't think there's anything wrong with staying with a company for a couple, 2, 3 years and continuing to learn and develop along the way. I think as a hiring manager who has looked at thousands of resumes in my life, I do tell you I get concerned if it's too quick. If it's like a year here or 14 months or 16 months, it's a big investment when you are hiring someone. There's a lot of training and development to get them up to speed. And I think if you see a pattern of moving too quickly, that could become a red flag for many. But there's many ways to build a successful career.
No, that's very good advice. 20 years is a very short period of time. I've been here 38 years.
Oh my goodness.
But I think that I fully agree with you. I think that over the course of 38 years, I've played different roles. And I've been very fortunate, and our dean has actually assigned me to this role. My guess each time is different topic, different agenda, and I learn so much. And usually, I even write a newspaper article about the topic before with the guest. Most of my students know that. So because I am curious about learning, so in that case, I don't get bored. I don't get really stuck. So I think that is very good. So you find your own passion and try to pursue that, and also ask your boss to create these kind of opportunities or create the opportunity for yourself, right? So I think that is a very good advice. Now, last question before I will open up to the floor, because they're dying to ask you questions. Now, as a leader in this changing world, what kind of advice will you give our alumni that will improve their chance of success in the complicated changing dynamics?
There's 2 things. One is I had a teacher early on. His big topic was persistence, and he was always persistence counts. He would bang on about it constantly, and I did find over my life, and as I interact with people, whether they're great business people or entertainers or entrepreneurs, the one through line that I have found with most of them, and over your 38 years, you'll probably find this too, is they're incredibly persistent. You know, they learn from every failure, they fail forward fast, but they are just the through line. So I think persistence is one. And the second one that I'll offer up is a little less conventional, and that is this concept of personal accountability. And personal accountability is really, it's an action concept. So if you see an issue like, wow, it's a really tough job market out there, you turn it around and you ask yourself the question behind the question. It's a what or a how. It's like, what can I do to make sure that I stand out in this job market? You know, or if you're in a team environment and the team's stuck and you can be like, you know, this team is just really not doing it for me. How can I help the team get unstuck? This simple concept on the question behind the question was an unlocker for me. It really was flipping of the switch. And I came across it about 18 or 19 years ago. And I'll tell you, it is simple. It is so simple, but it's incredibly empowering. So the combination of persistence and personal accountability, I think could be a bit of an unlocker for you too.
Wow, your advice is truly useful and meaningful. Because when I teach a class, we do have team projects. Occasionally, they do complain to me.
Never happens.
The teams are not working. Then I said, well, why don't you look at it as a good opportunity to practice your leadership, how to turn the team around. So I said, there's no harm done. Give it a try. Can you really lead the team? I said, that is a golden opportunity. If your team members are all doing well, you don't have a chance to shine. So treat it as an opportunity for you to illustrate, to practice, so that you actually have something to convince or impress you when they apply for the job at Mattel, right? Okay, very good. So, well, in view of time, I'm going to stop here. I want to thank you for really sharing your insights and wisdom about Mattel and also your personal journey. So thank you so much, Steve.
Chris, it's a pleasure, that's for sure.
Thank you. Okay, so now we open up the floor for questions. And please come up to the microphone and please introduce yourself and also which program you're in, and also that if you're alum, tell us which year you're in, and also ask Steve. So I just sit back and relax. Thank you.
I'm a member of the FEM class of 2024, the fully employed MBA program. I'm also part of the Warner Brothers Discovery family. I'm on the Harry Potter franchise team, so it's really amazing to hear you speak tonight and get your insights, especially on kids, because that's one of the things that we're really particularly interested in the franchise space, is how to capture and keep the next generation. So conscious that, especially in consumer products in that world, capturing and keeping the next generation, you're already thinking beyond the current next generation. You're thinking about the next generation. So what do you see as far as priorities about how the next generation is going to interact with your products, with your brands, and so on and so forth?
Sure. Well, first of all, you and your team are doing it incredibly well. I recall fondly the first time we pitched for the Harry Potter franchise at Mattel from Warner Brothers. We were flying hand samples over to JK for approval. We won that. I see that you're looking to move into a TV series for multiple years. So one way you could do that is give the Mattel rights to that TV series, and I can guarantee you 10 solid years of engagement. But I do think it is the classic full funnel, isn't it? It's a combination of making sure that you've got great content, that you have great product, that you are where your consumer is at. You know, they are incredibly digital savvy now. I think I mentioned earlier that Barbie Style has 2.2 million followers, and mostly kind of adult followers, which is incredible. If you're not on it, you should get on it. So I think it's a combination of just like thinking a little further ahead, making sure you're grounded in consumer insights, keeping that consumer at the center, and good things will happen. But I think it's the whole 360.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yes. And congratulations on your franchise.
My question for you, and thank you for coming here tonight, is how important was your in-country experience as you were growing up in your career, and how did that in-country experience help you create a successful framework for managing a very global team?
I think it was instrumental and critical. I'll give Australia as an example. First of all, when I look back, it might be the best gig. And when I talk to people who come up that run a country, they feel the same way for a bunch of reasons. Number one, it's a full business. It is sales, marketing, finance. You're managing a P&L. You're creating a corporate culture. You're making sure you can get that team rallied around a vision to execution. And that's something that's learned. Another thing is you're a little bit unshackled from the corporate head office. So although you're taking some direction, you do have some freedom within that framework, which is incredibly important to learn. Finally, I think it's like usually, depending on the country you're managing, it could be 3 or 4% of the global. You're not going to crash the car, So it enables you to learn, to take risks. And there's a reason why so many best practices kind of come from out to in, and it's what I just described. They do test and learn. They're fantastic marketers. I find they're bold in their thinking. So for me, it was foundational in my future success, and I look back on it fondly. If you ever get an opportunity to do an international assignment, it will change you in ways that you won't imagine, both from a business leader, but from a family and a person. It's very enriching to get into a different culture, for sure.
Can I ask the following question? Now, can you talk a little bit more about your global experience, how it actually transform your deeper understanding or how to actually lead the change in your organization?
Yeah, well, I did the first 15 or so years in international. And when you're an international, when you're not doing so well, we used to call it free help. So when corporate came to you and they'd spend a lot of time, it was a little bit of free help. There wasn't necessarily a complete understanding of what it takes to operate in country. Your resources are generally smaller. You've got to be double hatting a lot of the time, far more nimble. So I think that understanding and that empathy of what it took in the international regions, when I started to lead them, it wasn't like someone who's never worked or operated in the international arena. And I think that's been critical for me, quite frankly. Not only the trust of your teams, because they know that I've been there, I've done that, but just working collaboratively with them to help solve problems and communicate better to the senior management team, for sure.
Good, thank you.
My question is also about the next generation. The population of US, Europe, and East Asia is shrinking and getting old, but the population of Southeast Asia and Africa, like Morocco, Indonesia, India, is getting younger and is increased. So how is your company going to deal with global demographic change?
Yeah, well, dealing with, as you can imagine in my business, thank you for the question. We pay close attention to demographics. It does have an impact on our business. But, some of these growth markets are growth markets. It's right there in the title. We are growing fast in those markets. But in the rest of the markets where you see demographic shifts, in my business, it becomes a slower growth industry, then it becomes a bit more of a market share game. So it sharpens your focus. So when I talked earlier about the evolution of demand creation, whoever wins that the fastest is going to, take on shares. So it's different markets have different strategies, and that's really, in a nutshell, how we deal with that.
And my question, when you mentioned reducing the SKUs, I had a vision of you of all the managers playing with Barbies and Hot Wheels in the office trying to figure out what to eliminate. But if you can expand on that, is it a lot of focus groups with kids? Is it raw data? Is it input from the designers? What does that process look like when you're not the consumer of the product you're making?
Sure. Thanks for the question. It was nice chatting with you earlier. You sound like the voice. It's a very...
I have the worst voice that my wife says. Yeah. So I became a good musician.
In the future, it's probably going to be AI, frankly, but it's a combination of all that. There is a first pass that becomes quite obvious. Like we've got 6 medical kits in the line. One's a Barney, one's a this, one's a that. We don't need 6 medical kits in the line. We can get by with 2. Barbie's got 4 Corvettes and 3 of this and 2 of that. So the first pass becomes fairly obvious Beyond that, it becomes a little bit more touchy-feely. Very, designers and marketers are very particular about their product, you know what I mean? So when you lose a SKU or you lose a product, that's a tough time. But I think it's a combination of all of that. First pass is very easy. Second pass becomes a little more hands-on, but it is largely data-driven still. I'd say it's 90% data-driven.
And is there any focus group in the picture at any point? Do you bring kids in?
Focus groups happen earlier on in the design development standpoint. We do a lot of focus groups with kids still, yes. But when we get down to that SKU reduction, it's generally, there's generally been a bit of we just haven't done enough hygiene on our product line, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, to follow on the questions, we're curious because our school is also pushing for data analytics and business analytics. Now, you have tons of data from online channels, from your Walmart sales, from the consumer testing, all this. You have a lot of this kind of data. Then, how does your team, the company, utilize all this data to drive decisions?
Well, look, I think data analytics and data scientists is hot right now. Certainly in my industry, you mentioned Walmart, Amazon. Fact-based, data-driven selling stories are critical. Fact-based and insight-led. After all, we have a very big insights team. We rely on them. It's almost you become a bit of a consultant to your customer. So the ability to read, understand data, glean the insights and figure out what the actions are, I think that's invaluable. The old insight without action is just trivia. It's nice to know, but who really cares? But you really need to know what to do with that. So I think you should lean more into it is what I'm saying, Chris. You got something there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good to know. Yes.
I'm a FEMBA student, and when you were speaking about the toy industry being a high growth market, I was wondering, are you also including board games? And I'm wondering about acquisitions, because I know that Mattel is a large player as well as Hasbro, and the other toy companies are just main players, and the room for startups and that's
yes.
Interesting.
Yes, well, it is a growth industry. It's been growing globally for about 12 years. I wouldn't say it's a high growth industry. Now, we did grow quite rapidly during the pandemic. So toys definitely was a pandemic winner, but we did actually comp those numbers last year, essentially flat on 2 years of double-digit growth. So in the US, it's a $37 billion industry. It was about $30 billion pre-COVID. There are some large players, but even the large players don't get deep into double-digit share. Mattel has been the #1 toy company in the US for 29 consecutive years. You think of all the changes in the last 29 years, and the only constant in this industry is Mattel has remained as #1. Some of the companies that are in the top 10 weren't even around even 20 years ago. I am including board games. There still is a lot of M&A. Mattel did grow a lot in the 80s and 90s through acquisition. We've slowed that a little bit in recent years, but it still is a big part of this industry. As its innovation and barriers to entry and the larger companies tend to borrow some of that as they move along.
How do you foresee TikTok and all these other social media companies and entrance of, I guess, new players? Because I know Elf on the Shelf is a new, I don't know if you're aware of Elf on the Shelf. I think it was a mother and daughter.
No, I'm aware of it. Yeah, of course. Yes. Yes. I'm aware of it all. Come on. No, it is. I think it's phenomenal. There has been a lot of, I would say, hit product developed over the last few years, either from TikTok or from YouTube, or looking what's happening, either organically and designing and developing product that replicates that. Certainly, as a marketing tool, as I talked about earlier, phenomenal marketing tools. So I do think it is a fertile ground to get insights on play patterns. And again, this replaces some of the focus groups. You click on your screen, you see what's happening out there, and then trends can emerge from those platforms.
Thank you so much.
Now I want to follow the question. when you talk about innovation, there are many forms of innovations. One type is tracking the trends, looking at the click stream, looking at the play pattern and whatnot. But then we still remember the late Steve Jobs. He also created, well, he said that sometimes maybe we need to create product that's the consumer does not even know they would like. So to what extent Mattel was also contemplate with that kind of idea to create a new form of toys or entertainment that the consumer does not even know they would appreciate yet.
Yeah, well, I do think that's a big part of our industry. When you see breakout hit toys, a lot of the times you don't see them coming. We certainly have a history of that. Going back to the days of even Tickle Me Elmo, back when that became a phenomenon. So many examples I could give you of hit toys that no one thought about. But I think a great example here is a few years ago we launched Hot Wheels ID, which was merging physical and digital. And the insight was, or the hypothesis, what if you could put a chip in every car, and you could track how fast you are going, how long you stay on the track, what is your crashing looking like, and you could race amongst your friends, but you had a data set. And then what if you could put that data set and then race virtually? So if there was a video game that you could race that same car virtually and physically. And we went into design development. We launched it with Apple. It wasn't successful, but we did learn so much from the way we went to the market. There was actually case studies now that people are studying on that innovation process, because we were breaking our own norms on that. So yes, we were always looking at ways to make sure that we are getting to that next innovative product idea.
Absolutely. Innovative ideas does not always work, but you can always learn from it. Even Steve Jobs, he failed many times. Just like what you said earlier, persistence will help you get there. Thank you.
So I also work in the CPG industry, and I've noticed how you're sharing that you've decreased the number of SKUs, but I've also seen that there's been more diversity in the types of Barbies there are out there. So I would imagine that also decreases your efficiency, because you'd have to produce like different skin tones and hairs, which causes variable costs to increase more. And I'm curious, has that been offset as far as customer acquisition by bringing in diversity versus the production costs?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes in a brand, you have to do it. You have to do it to keep your brand relevant. When you have a 64-year-old brand with Barbie, you have to constantly be refreshing, reinventing, and making sure you're meeting the consumer where she or he is at. Barbie is a great example where, you mentioned the career. Barbie's had over 250 careers, and it's been core to the DNA of the brand to make sure that, you can be who you want to be. You have to see it to be it. When it came to diversity, inclusion, and body types, Hulu did a documentary on this actual, what happened. It's called On Tiny Shoulders. I think you should check it out. It's about the year, maybe even 18-month journey that Barbie brand team went when they made the decision to lean heavily into body types. Barbie landed on the cover of Time magazine, and the headline, there was a silhouette, and the headline was, "Can we stop talking about my body now?" So sometimes in a brand, you need to positively disrupt your own brand in order to stay relevant. And I think that's what you've been seeing with this brand. But the return is definitely there, as the last 2 years have been the biggest 2 years in Barbie's history as a brand. So that's pretty phenomenal when you think about that.
I wanted to say first, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. So my question is kind of a selfish question. So I am looking forward to the Barbie movie that's coming out this summer. And I was really curious, and I thought it was so smart of the marketing campaign that you had mentioned about the selfies on Instagram and the square. But I also noticed with Barbie and this film that is kind of, I feel marketed towards an older generation rather than children. So I was curious on the decision making of deciding to make a film kind of geared towards more of a older generation rather than children, if there was any risk to that, especially since I think the film, please forgive me, I think is PG-13. So I was just really curious around that.
It is a great question. You can imagine the amount of debate that happened inside of Mattel with this film. Again, I mentioned earlier, our new CEO, Ynon Kreiss, came on about 5 years ago, and he comes from the entertainment world. And one of the things that we've done with this movie is we have some of the most talented content creators in the world. Greta Gerwig is phenomenal. Noam Baumbach, her writing partner, Margot Robbie. So whatever the product is going to be phenomenal. But you're right, when you're talking about taking a 64-year-old franchise, you do have to have a little bit of trust here when you hand that over. A lot of times when these franchises stop, it's because a brand owner might get too controlling over a brand. A lot of these brands trickle down. Jurassic World, PG-13, sold lots of toys around. Batman, our Warner Brothers friend, PG-13, we sold lots of toys around that. I think the humor is going to be such that it's going to hit different audiences differently. You don't know until it launches.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Very insightful question, by the way. It's for sure on our minds.
So I know you mentioned about how the fact is that you still believe that physical toys is going to be is still continuing to be a real thing. I'm curious primarily because of the TikTok revolution, like someone mentioned, if childhoods are getting shorter, so people are outgrowing their toys quicker. Yeah. And is that, what are the repercussions for that on Mattel? And if you even believe that that's a thing?
Yeah, no, it's a thing. It's a thing that we don't talk about as much anymore, but they actually termed it. It was called Kegoi, which is kids getting older, younger. And that is for sure a thing. People are aging out of our toys at an earlier range. So, with that insight in mind, you have to make adjustments. But the other end of the spectrum, in the last 2 or 3 years, kidult or adult collector has been the fastest growing segment of my industry. So, if you think about Funko as an example, they're a competitor. They've been really fast growing. Mattel, we have Mattel Creations. And if you haven't checked out Mattel Creations, definitely download it onto your Instagram. It is our kind of adult version. It's a cultural creation where we do all of our collabs. It's art as toys and toys inspired by art. I'll give you an example. We did a collab with Gucci to do their 1972 Cadillac. It sold out in 3 seconds. It actually crashed the Gucci site. It's the first time the Gucci site has crashed. And it was the day we launched this. But we partner with designers. You saw Mark Ryden, a great American serialist, with Barbie. We did a pop-up shop here in LA. Matsaki, a Japanese artist. So this whole Mattel Creations, it's super cool. It's at collectors, and it's the fastest growing division we have right now at Mattel. So yes, there is some young, but we get them older, and so the combination of two is a net positive.
It's really cool. And I went to the pop-up that you had in Vegas. It was
you
really
did?
fun.
Great, fantastic. There's one now in Santa Monica. The Barbie experience.
Right after this, I'm heading to a global marketing management class. So I'm very interested in your global to local setup right now and how that works, especially when toys can be very culturally specific. If there's anything in terms of product development or innovation that you see on those local areas that feeds up into the global.
Yeah, look, I think the global to local concept or go-to-market concept certainly isn't unique to Mattel. Some of it is it's just really asset creation and making sure that you've got a suite of assets that are being developed, and the local teams can, they can interpret them. They'll certainly have to get them into local language, but it avoids them having to use local agencies so much. So this is the freedom within a framework that I'm talking about. So I would say, 60 or 70%, there's a global direction. You do have to localize that for your local culture, your local channels, your local insights. But we're trying to get more global to local. And it's really, we find it's more efficient and more effective. So you win both ways. So really that's the concept there.
My question was very similar to hers on the globalization, of your products. As you said, Mattel's DNA is very much If you see it, you can be it. And I'm curious how you take that idea and that aspect of your company's core into different global markets and adapt it for different local and cultural areas.
Sure. There's many. First of all, we do make some changes to the product line in certain markets, small nuanced changes, for example. I was with a team in Japan about maybe a year ago where we're partnering with the local government to use Barbie as a way to inspire young Japanese girls to be more career-oriented. So it's an entire program that we're working together. We have this dream gap that, if you don't see it, you cannot be it. And this is the whole dream gap. I should have brought a video about it. It's an initiative. So the Japanese government got a hold of this, and we were talking to them about that. So that's an example how we use our brand and our brand promise to adapt it for different markets around the world. That's one example, but there's many more.
That's really cool. Thank you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm in a unique situation because I actually work for Mattel. I was an MBA intern last summer, convinced you guys to hire me as soon as possible. So I've been there for a few months now. I'm in the supply chain organization under portfolio management. So you talked on two great points. One is the SKU cutting, as well as how Mattel has done really well during the pandemic. So I know our targets and thresholds are high and we want to beat our COVID goals. So I'm just curious, where do you see the supply chain perspective in the next few years, and how can we achieve and continue the momentum to do even better than how we were doing during the pandemic?
I feel like we're in a family meeting here. I could drop by my office tomorrow and I'll share some ideas. But, we do have a roadmap, as you know, within global supply chain. But look, Mattel is always a culture of continuous improvement, which most great companies are. When you hit a benchmark, you look around, you take a pause. How is this working? You increase the benchmark. And that is something that we've done on SKUs and our global supply chain partners, for example, which have been phenomenal partners with us over the years in terms of providing that data, giving that encouragement, understanding what production run rates are, how long they keep a tool in the machine for. All that goes into the decision-making process. So I would kind of use the headline of continuous improvement, the collaboration between global supply chain, marketing, and the commercial organization. And with that collaboration, good things generally happen coming out the other side. Thank you, and welcome to Mattel.
So as a business executive that's been at the helm through many business cycles, what advice can you give to us how to maintain morale and productivity during economic downturns, especially with all the talk of doom and gloom these days?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. Number one, and it's a little bit in vogue right now, but I think empathetic leadership is like for real. You need to practice empathy at all time. So that's number one. Number two is, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago when the economy was a little down, Mattel was, not where we were today. I would start every meeting with I call the Mattel moments of pride. Let's start this session with what are we feeling good about? What is really happening that we feel positive about? And that little opening 3 or 4 minutes, it's a bit of a fake it till you make it, but that was critical in just changing the mindset. I think it's a classic, you got to control the controllables. You got to focus on what is a positive mindset. But at the same time, this is where the empathy comes in. It is not the same for everyone. It's not easy for everyone. So you just have to understand that. And then I'll finally land with this concept that I mentioned earlier of personal accountability and what can I do to that I have found to be extremely helpful as well.
Thank you so much.
We're time for the last question. We saved the best for the last.
I'm fascinated by the way Mattel has switched from being a toy manufacturing company to an owner of IP and a manager of IP. And recently you've expanded specifically with Barbie very aggressively into the media and entertainment space. Can you talk to us a little bit about this strategy for breaking into that space? And should we start thinking of Mattel as a new media and entertainment company rather than a CPG company?
Yeah, look, it's on. I brought some slides I didn't show today, but we have two parts. One is our toy side, and to the right side, it is unlocking the value of our IP, and it's on our website. It's our one-page strategy, and it is content. It is digital, and it is consumer products, and it's exactly what you're talking about. We have one of the greatest catalogs of children's IP in the world. I like to say next to Disney. And he's right there. But if you think about it, Barbie, Hot Wheels, Fisher-Price, Masters of the Universe, Matchbox, I could go on and on. I guarantee you, every person in this room has touched or played with one of our products in your childhood. These are emotional connections that last a lifetime. And if you think about a place to start in content or entertainment, something that you have such an affinity with is a good place to be versus a blank slate. So I think you're going to see more and more. We have experts that we've hired in the field that are experts in all of these verticals, in digital gaming, in consumer products, and in content creation and development. And I think you're just going to see us go from strength to strength in the coming years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, Steve, listening to you, I really feel that I was in the wrong career. I should have joined Mattel 38 years ago. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and wisdom. Be persistent and pursue your dream so that you can lead to the path to success. So you really demonstrate in terms of end-to-end as a chief commercial officer. Thank you very much for joining.
Chris, my pleasure.
Thank
you, everybody. Thank you.